Hello and welcome to another installment here at BandQ Magic. I'm sitting here with Clayton, and the two of us together are going to interview Benji on his Innistrad cube, which we'll be drafting later this month.
Yeah, so I see here that you've gone with a 540 cube. Why is that?
Part of the reason I went with 540 as my cube count was that I couldn't bring myself to clip down too many more cards. There was a lot in the blocks that I chose that really stood out to me as really impactful, flavorful, memorable, and interesting. And so I was originally shooting for a 360 and couldn't find it in me to go any further.
To be fair, though, there are a lot of good cards in both sets, and that's an interesting point, that it's a block cube and not the traditional powered cube or unpowered cube in the case of Pauper.
Or a Pauper cube or any other kind of cube style. Yeah, blocks stood out to me a lot. I had two friends that got into the pick two blocks that shared a plane and run with them as your theme for the block. We picked Andrew Lindsay picked Ravnica blocks when Return to Ravnica came out, and then when Return to Zendikar came out, our friend Mitch got super onto it and built his multi-Zendikar set cube. And when they announced Shadows over Innistrad, I just went insane. And before Shadows over Innistrad even came out, I had already built the first edition of my cube using just old Innistrad cards.
Okay, so that brings up a point. Is like, okay, so Morrow has said that Innistrad is the Gothic horror of Magic. Is that what drew you to build an Innistrad cube? Did you like the Gothic horror?
Yeah, there's something to be said for Gothic horror in general, but there's also the fact that other cubes or other blocks that could be themed, like say a Theros block cube or a Lorwyn block cube, they have a theme, but not so strongly referenced to outside lore as the horror tropes that they were drawing on for Innistrad. Every card in Innistrad is a reference to something in literature and in movie culture and just in the primal subconscious things that go on in our heads. Rack with Madness stands out as just a really awesome, flavorful card, just well themed in the horror sets.
I can get behind that. But so in Innistrad was pretty focused on 5 tribes, being humans, spirits, vampires, zombies, and werewolves. How did you go about balancing out the 5 major tribes of Innistrad?
With immense difficulty. One of the things that I didn't expect to happen initially was a lot of people like to draft interesting flavors, and so they'd draft vampires, and they'd force the archetype without really considering how open it was. Like, they'd draft the awesome Olivia Voldaren, and then they'd realize, I'm building my deck, and I have 3 great black-red cards, but it turns out I accidentally drafted things from too many other archetypes for flavor reasons. Another problem that came up was certain tribes are really out of balance. Humans stand out especially as ridiculously good. Not only do they branch into all 5 colors, but green-white humans especially has so much power. Oh my goodness. Micaeus, the Lunarch, to be specific, champion of the parish, Thalia, mayor of Averbrook. And the fact that werewolves overlapped with humans, because werewolves are humans on their front side, also made balancing tribes difficult. So that was really the biggest problem I had early on in building the cube. And so that's why you don't find things like Champion of the Parish in the cube. Can't bring myself to cut Mayor of Averbrook, though.
Yeah, I love Champion of the Parish. It's such a good card.
Thalia's lieutenant is currently the replacement, and he's kind of like a Champion of the Parish and then some.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we are kind of talking about what is not in the cube, but are there more substantial things that aren't in the cube that one would expect to see in an Innistrad-themed cube?
Well, one of the elements of old Innistrad drafts, that especially Innistrad Dark Ascension drafts, that was really popular and I really enjoyed, was Burning Vengeance, which was a super cool archetype that built around Burning Vengeance and What was the other card? Secrets of the Dead?
Yes.
Yeah, those two cards in combination to generate insane advantage. When you flashback cards from the graveyard, you're not losing cards from your hand. So it's basically free cantrips on top of Burning Vengeance, shooting damage around when you flash cards back. It was a wild mess. That doesn't work because I built a singleton cube, and there are not nearly enough flashback cards in the colors of blue and red to make that really viable.
Mm-hmm. Well, I seem to, like, when I've looked over the list of your cube, I don't see a certain black female planeswalker that just screams Innistrad, and that being Liliana the Veil.
Liliana of the Veil. Forsooth. Cutting Liliana of the Veil was 100% the hardest choice I've made in building this cube. First, when I built it, I looked at Liliana of the Veil and said, okay, she's awesome, and I happen to own her already. Sweet. And then I looked at Liliana Heretical Healer, who is another Liliana, is flavorfully connected to Innistrad, and I wasn't really dead set on never putting in anything from outside of Innistrad. Clearly, because I've also included Kraum, Ludovic's Opus from the recent Commander sets. But Liliana Heretical Healer made the Liliana of the Veil not an automatic decision, because that would be 1 black Planeswalkers with the same name on the back side. So already I was digging myself in a little deep, and so I just said, no, Heretical Healer, we'll just keep Liliana of the Veil. And then Eldritch Moon came out. And they gave me another 1 black Liliana Planeswalker. And I said, Wizards, why are you doing this to me? And I ended up deciding after an oracle came to me in my dreams and said, Benji, just make the right decision. I decided to put in Liliana the Last Hope, because flavorfully she connected so much better with the themes that I was shooting for in the cube. Vampires had a lot of discard synergies already, but this gave some zombie synergies, some recursion synergies that I really enjoyed, as opposed to the madness synergies that Liliana of the Veil was supporting. So, hard decision, but that's what I went with.
Okay, so yeah, I get your points on that. But speaking of another Planeswalker, this is also Sorin's homeworld. And from both Innistrads, there are 2 different Sorins. How about that? Are both in here?
Originally, I was running both. When Sorin Grim Nemesis came out, I said, hey, we have 2 Sorins, and one kind of works with tokens, and one kind of works with a controlling style of gameplay. And maybe even with Reanimator and card advantage. Very different things that they did. But that didn't really end up working out the way I expected. A lot of people were just jamming them both if they could, because it turns out Planeswalkers are really busted. So I ended up relegating the black-white Planeswalker slot to Sorin Lord of Innistrad, because I felt like the token strategies needed it more than the nebulous, undefined realm of controlling black-white.
Okay, I get that. One thing that I noticed that's unique with your cube is you have this flip binder, or your transform binder. Consists of all the transform cards in Innistrad. Give me some details on that.
Well, I don't know about you or the viewers at home, but I super hate when my sleeves get ripped. And it turns out when almost a fifth of your cube is cards that people would have to take in and out of their sleeves, you'll rip your sleeves super fast. And it was one of the initial issues I had when I was testing with it. People were tearing sleeves constantly. Right now, I'm running crappy Ultra Pros as my sleeves before I finish foiling out the cube and put new sleeves on it. So Ultra Pros tear really fast. And so I decided that I was going to have a binder that had a second copy of every transform. So there is 1 copy in the sleeve and 1 copy in the binder that people use like tokens. So instead of ripping the card out of the sleeve, turning it over, they just grab a double-sleeved and 2 clear sleeves version of the card, and they can use that to flip back and forth. Turns out Huntmaster likes to flip. That was actually the first sleeve that ripped. So that's why I went with the binder. It also looks super pimp, and I can just show people, here's what's in my cube, and they're like, it's a super shiny binder. It's pretty awesome.
Okay, I get the reason behind that.
Other thing about flips is that only flips can tell a story. That's one of the things that drew me to Innistrad too, is that flips can tell a story in and of themselves. Startled awake, you see a woman haunted by memories of a child, and on the other side you see the child stalking up. It's a story being told on one card. It's not an image, it's a tale.
And just like with the Civilized Scholar, is that the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde?
Yeah, the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde theme was really good. The evil angel with Avacyn, the transformation from angry to genuinely evil and destructive. Oh, just so many cool things that go on. And melds. Don't even get me started on flipping Gisela and Bruna to Brizella, the da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, bring in the pain.
Okay.
So that's the story of the flip binder.
All right.
Now, I personally have drafted your cube a couple times, and I still can't locate those ramp spells.
No.
Do you know what those are, or...
No, Clayton, I forgot what ramp spells are. One of the big problems with both of the Innistrad sets was actually an utter poverty of land fixing and ramping style spells. There's a few of them in green. One that stands out as exceptionally powerful is Somberwald Sage. Taps for 3 mana of any color, but can only be used to cast creature spells. Oh darn, I'll cast Craterhoof on turn 4. Whoopsie. But what one of the struggles has been with that is fixing colors. But what that has done, I think, in a positive light, has been really focus people on 2 colors. Especially for tribe focuses or archetype focuses. Somebody who builds blue-red spells really can't afford to grab some of those good white spells too. So it really helps at a draft table to focus people on their archetypes, and so that everybody ends up building a cool, fun deck.
Mm-hmm. And with the lack of ramp, is there a lack of fixing as well? Do you have many of those 2-color lands, or is it more the spell lands that are famous on Innistrad?
Well, famously on Innistrad, as you have said, there's this awesome cycle of 2-color effect lands, like Kessig Wolf Run, Gavany Township, which is super busted, by the way. These spells really stand out as spells and not lands, and that's really frustrating. But at the same time, it gives you new accesses for how you play the game. I think in total there are 3 land cycles of 5 lands total in Old Innistrad and New Innistrad that tap for more than 1 color. And there's Cavern of Souls and Shimmering Grotto besides. So I think it ends up coming out to a total... Oh, and Warped Landscape and Evolving Wilds. So that gives you a total of 19 multicolor lands, which is really small for a 540 cube. Not much I could do about that. So I did what I could and just focused the cube really hard on those 2-color strategies. So even inside of the cube, there aren't very many artifacts.
Yeah.
There's notably more equipments than anything else. Period. There's 19 equipments and 30 colorless spells in the colorless part of my cube, which is ridiculous. They didn't print a whole lot of fixing for it, and I think they might have had the same reason. That they really wanted to push people to draft those... To not draft Jund, not draft Esper, not pulling good stuff. No, you're going to build a strategy. I think they did a really good job of rewarding people for doing that.
That they did.
Okay, so I saved this question for last, and I'm sure the viewers are wondering if they know Innistrad block. I went through the cube and I found this card. It is known as Tibalt the Fiendblood. Why is this card in this cube? Morrow considered to be one of the worst planeswalkers in Magic's history.
And among the worst cards. Before those strategies got really big in Eldritch Moon, I shot for keeping Tibalt in there just to spite people, and also to be an interesting kind of enabler. It produces some really interesting game effects when the burn player plays a Tibalt and the controlling or mid-range player doesn't really know whether or not they should kill it. Like, is it worth it to, maybe my opponent draws and discards their Hellrider, That seems pretty awesome. So it doesn't really represent any particular card advantage as a result. And it doesn't even present card selection, because you discard a card at random. But his effects, as he ticks up the scale, are surprisingly powerful, and it makes for interesting choices on the players playing its part and for their opponents. So that's why I stuck him in there.
He's really not that bad. It's a little weak when you sack him off to deal maybe 3 or 4 damage, but you're still getting some value out of him. So,
and he's far better here than he is in any constructed format. That's definitely true too.
Yeah, it's probably one of the few times you ever see him.
Where it's any good at all.
And so, as with most cubes, there is a plan or a schedule. Like, maybe I want to add more cards to it to make it more playable for more people. What are your future plans on the cube?
Well, I have 4 big things I want to accomplish before I consider this cube done. The first is something that I started out with, but as my cube has been updated, I've kind of let it fall by the wayside. It's been an achievement system, where card effects and certain combinations of cards entering the battlefield would win people points that they could cash in every year to have something done, like get one of my cards altered in a way that they like, or get a new token made with their image in it. And they could make some pretty free decisions with it. It'd be fun and rewarding. One example of one that Nick actually achieved in one of my drafts early on was an achievement I called Boy Scouts of Innistrad, where you had to win the game with a creature carrying 3 equipments, which wasn't particularly easy, but it was really fun and interesting, and gave Nick some opportunities to have one of the most retardedly large invisible stalkers I'd ever seen. Why that's a human, I don't know, because that's not fair. Another big thing is foiling out the cube. Recently I went to Grand Prix San Jose and picked up some really expensive foils. I picked up a foil Liliana the Last Hope, foil Cavern of Souls. Picked up some of those things so that it'll be easier for me in the future to gradually pick up the last 100 cards I need to really foil it out. I also need to get new sleeves. Oh my goodness, do I need to get new sleeves?
Yes, I agree. Because if you don't know, his sleeves are almost you can almost see the backs of them.
Vaguely transparent. So if you're paying a lot of attention, yeah, you can see the backs of transforms.
Yes, and that's kind of a disadvantage for the players playing the sleeves, because they get to know what's on top of their library.
Yeah, so it's technically cheating at the moment. Eventually I'll get that done. Other thing I want to do eventually, like I said, I had trouble cutting down this cube. But I really want to have a 360 card version of the cube for when I can only get 7 or 8 people to come and draft it, so that I can still have those clutch cards featured in every rendition of the cube. That somebody doesn't draft a Grizzlebrand hoping to find Unburial Rites or some other Reanimator spell, and no Reanimator spells are actually in the draft. I think that's really unfun and unfair to punish people for picking archetypes that might not actually exist or be rewarded in that current draft. So, those are my plans.
Okay. Well, thanks for sitting down with us and talking about your awesome cube. But for those at home, we will have a video of this cube coming out later, and be sure to subscribe, and we will get that video out to you shortly.
Thanks, guys.